Hello and welcome along to COP30 Covered, the daily podcast show from the award-winning Edie editorial team, where we're bringing you all the latest news and views from the 2025 UN Climate Summit, which is taking place right now in Brazil. Was the commitment made 2 years ago to treble global renewables a success? Who is investing billions of dollars in new grid infrastructure? And are we any closer to an official COP agreement? We explain everything in 45 minutes or less per episode. Yes, welcome back to COP30 Covered from Edie. You're listening to the voice of Edie's content editor, Sarah George, and it is Saturday the 15th of November 2025. It's just me in the podcast today because I'm not cruel enough to summon the rest of the team in the middle of their weekend, although we've all been working a little bit today to bring you the latest. For those new to the COP process, COPs are meant to run from one Monday until the end of the following Friday, so that's a total of 12 days. And within that time frame, there is only one official rest day, which is the middle Sunday. So the middle Saturday does tend to be a bit quieter when you're on the ground in terms of side events. People do tend to try and take some time if they can, but official negotiators are in the room all the time as usual because negotiations continue on the Saturday the same as they would on a weekday. And there's actually a little bit more pressure on this particular day because countries are always pushing to get as much of a first draft of a final agreement as they can before the rest break. So this is the sort of halfway check-in point. They try and get a halfway draft. At the time of recording, so Belem is 3 hours behind us here in the UK, we've not seen that draft yet. I'm not expecting it until after I've gone to bed, to be honest, but it could be imminent, so do watch that space. In the meantime, for today's top of the COPs, here are 3 things that we do know about what's been going on today. So outside of the COP venue itself, a people's march has been held across Belem, uniting thousands of people. So we're talking individual protesters, NGOs, civil society groups and indigenous groups too. There have been colourful scenes on display and you can find pictures of this online. One of my favourite images, this is really striking, has been 3 huge coffins labelled coal, oil and gas, and they were marched through the city as part of a funeral for fossil fuels. There have also been banners saying things like "hands off of our forest." There's been no reported disruption at the COP venue as a result of the march, but attendees were advised to leave early and take extra time to travel. Also today, a high-level ministerial dialogue on climate finance is being held, focusing on what the UN calls forward-looking commitments. If you listened to yesterday's episode, you know that climate finance is always one of the absolute stickiest issues at the COP. Nonetheless, despite those challenges, countries agreed last year to target $300 billion per year of climate finance to be reached as soon as possible. The stretch goal in the Baku to Belem roadmap is $1.3 trillion annually from 2035. And ministers were told earlier this week by experts at the Grantham Institute that getting there is entirely feasible. So we'll see who is feeling ready to rise to that challenge. And our third and final top of the COP story today, ministers from 10 countries in total, led by Chile, have launched a new global transport effort, the aim being aligning this sector with the Paris Agreement. Each participating country has agreed to draw up its own transition roadmap, but there are some headline goals that they'll all share, including cutting the energy demand for the transport sector by 25% by 2035 and to end the use of what they're calling unsustainable fuels by this point as well. So all systems go on side launches, official negotiations and civil society mobilisation. And in terms of what we're seeing discussed in side events, today's themes are the same as yesterday's. So they include energy, transport, industry, trade, finance, carbon markets, and bringing down non-CO2 gases. So these are themes that people always, I'd say, wait for at the COP, but people tend to jump into them straight away and start talking about them even before we get there. So Again, a plethora of themes, and we're going to be focusing on the energy transition specifically today. So to paint a picture of where we're at on the energy transition at COP. So COP28 in Dubai only 2 years ago was actually the first COP in which fossil fuels were mentioned explicitly in the final official agreement. After weeks of bickering over whether countries should pledge to phase down or phase out, they ended up settling on a pledge to transition away from fossil fuels, which was some interesting language with some loopholes, and arguably more concrete than that on a non-official agreement, so something that happened outside of the main text. More than 100 governments that were present in Dubai agreed to try and treble the world's installed renewable energy capacity by the end of the decade. The International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, has tracked accelerated deployment and investment over both years since then. So progress has been getting faster and faster. In terms of finance, $624 billion was invested in new renewable generation last year. But that hasn't put the world on track. IRENA said that an investment level of $1.4 trillion each year is now needed through 2030. The good news is that the market factors at present do mean that accelerated deployment is extremely likely, and that was according to the IEA, which said that earlier this week. It noted that solar and batteries are now the most affordable new energy options in the vast majority of places. So this isn't to do with ideology anymore, it's to do with simple market economics. But the agency did note that massive acceleration is not inevitable. There are numerous practicalities to be considered, including political headwinds, fossil fuel lobbying, skills gaps and grid gaps, and those things are already coming to fruition. On grids, the IEA did say 2 years ago that annual global investment in grids has remained broadly stagnant since the world agreed the Paris Agreement. So an average of around $300 billion per year. The agency said that funding level will need to double to $600 billion by the end of the decade in a 1.5C aligned scenario. So this is a nice segue into our special guest interview today. So I spoke with Alfredo Parres, who is Hitachi Energy's head of renewables, and he's worked in this sector for decades at this point. And we had a fascinating chat about how the practicalities of scaling clean energy go beyond the visible parts of the iceberg. So we're all talking about the big turbines and the solar panels, but are we really thinking about what's going on underneath the surface? So in his interview, he explained why, to reach the trebling of renewables goal, we need a far more concerted focus on grids, flexibility, and energy systems as a whole. So here is that discussion with Alfredo in full. Thank you so much for your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sarah. Always good to have a chance to speak about things we like.
Of course, and that's why you're here. You've got far deeper expertise in all things to do with renewables deployment and supply chain than I do. So it would be great to get a bit of an introduction to yourself and to what Hitachi Energy is doing in the field of renewables.
Let me start maybe telling what we don't do. So we are not the turbine manufacturers. We don't build solar panels. We don't build batteries. So these are all those technologies that are probably the visible part of the iceberg. So what we stand for as Hitachi Energy, our core mission stands around grids. So we help connecting renewables to the grid. We need help integrating them into the system, bringing those electrons from the generation to the consumers, wherever they are. And we do this helping to keep the system stable, because we want to have energy every day of the year. All these things are based on a number of knowledge and capabilities we do have. We understand generation, inverter-based generation, because solar and wind are different than other sources of generation because they are based on power electronics. And that's important to understand how it works. We understand how grids works, of course. And we are mastering a number of technologies. So those building blocks are breakers, transformers, HVDC, STATCOMs, digital, advanced power electronics. So all these are the building blocks of the solutions that we provide eventually. And we put on top of that the digital layer, extremely important these days. So we are a leading company, a global leading company and technology leader, and we bring to the space solutions to help integrating those renewables to the grid. There is no energy transition without transmission. There is no renewables without grid. So we like to be this voice bringing this message, and we'll talk a lot about that during today. We like to be this strong voice. And in this, my role is to carry the flag of renewables inside the company, to say, look, this is the direction we want to go, so that we all together we have a clear route to follow, and the flag also in the market, to show to the world our commitment.
Got it. So I'm presuming your clients are the people that are developing what you say, the visible parts of the iceberg. So like the renewables developers, or maybe the grid operators, distribution networks, right?
Exactly. It's a broad range of actors that are intervening in the whole supply chain, the whole project lifetime in different stages.
Got it. And I'd love to dive into essentially the intricacies of the supply chain and the procurement for these things. So a couple of COPs ago now, nations pledged to treble the world's global installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. This was met with huge fanfare, and then very quickly a lot of commentary on how on earth we're going to do that, what it'll mean in terms of grid, supply chain investment, etc. So how did you react when you saw that pledge? What was your thoughts after seeing that?
I think you described it very well, Sarah. I think it was a mix of enthusiasm and satisfaction. Gosh, I mean, we've been in this journey for a long while. Myself have been in this industry since 1999. So you've seen all this going step by steps and going through all the challenges. So with this COP 2 years ago, we saw that, okay, this is a confirmation. There is a line of travel, a direction of travel we can follow. So, and a confirmation that we were probably doing the right things. We had been probably doing the right things. But the other side of the coin is a call for action. Also, okay, now we have a goal, so we need to deliver. And for us, that means what? First, start with a vision. So reinforce this vision that we can run a power system with high penetration of renewables. As a technology company, we took also this responsibility of conceptualizing things. So let me explain what I mean with conceptualization. So we understand where we want to go, when we want to arrive. We know where we are, and there are many different routes to get there. So we took as a responsibility to explain to society and to ourselves what are those possible routes. So we put our best engineers to try to anticipate what the future can look like. And doing this, we developed the solutions that were required, and we put grids at the center stage. We built so-called market innovation team, and market innovation again is a name that talks by itself. So this is the team of best engineers that have been conceptualizing through simulation scenarios what the future of the grid look like. We built this global renewable organization that I'm leading, and we put this one company strategy to deliver. So all this was what we did with this COP that told us, look, this is the direction we want to go, this is one we have to achieve, and we as a technology company, this is the role we want to take to make it happen.
Got it. And as we said, this vision was set in 2023. So there has been time for that forecasting, that innovation building, that skills mapping. But at the same time, the world has changed extremely quickly, and in some ways for the worse. So we've seen things like increased supply chain costs in offshore wind, reduced investment in that particular industry in the US and other markets. But then we also hear the good news as well, as you mentioned, digital solutions, falling costs in some other technologies. So where are we in this? What's been good since 2 years ago, and what's been not so good?
So welcome to my world and to our world. Facing these changing realities is amazing. Things can change so fast. So on the positive side, you said it. So we saw this tremendous cost reduction that technology brought into renewables. So today they are the more cost-effective, lower cost solution to address a new generation installation. We had years of low interest rates. That was really a boost for this industry. We had a technology that we could implement and deploy fast. So speed was the name of the game, deployment of renewables. So that created this ecosystem, extremely efficient, support, of course, by the strong policies we could enjoy. That put us in this virtuous circle where things were running well. And grid also were enjoying some good things and good times. investment in grids were accelerating. We saw TenneT came with a 2 gigawatt HVDC program, which is a program to buy large-scale multi-projects of HVDC technologies to connect offshore wind farm to the grid. That was a message to the market. This is for real. We have huge demand. We anticipate this demand. We go to the market. So we saw a lot of good things happening, no? And that's where in the mood we were until something happened. No, difficult to say what was exactly, but we know the headwinds are there. And you mentioned some of those, Sarah, no? Interest rates are not the same. They're much higher. And this is for this industry, high capex upfront. This is killing the business case. It's affecting heavily the business case. Permitting is what we hear always, permitting, whether it's permitting for my wind farm, for my solar farm, or permitting for new grids. Oh, this is a challenge. So the regulatory framework around permitting is not delivering what it should. And I mentioned grids. This is the big piece, and we talk about that extensively. But energy prices. So we are in a moment now where whether it's negative prices or high prices, we have a price problem. So the price point is not there. And that again, it kills the business case. And this is a business, an industry that is built on a business case. We don't do this for free, of course. No. So affordability comes in the picture, so that makes the discussion more complex. And then politics. So with change of governments, and change of government seems okay, then we can change the direction. And that's really, really harmful. So these are the headwinds. But if you allow me, Sarah, maybe we can spend a bit more time talking about grids. You know, specifically, what are the challenges and why we talk so much about grids right now. Let me start putting ourselves where we were, a few years ago. And I'm really talking now about the experience of us as a company. We're in an industry where we're used to incremental new investments because we need to keep the grid updated, some expansion here and there, but very, very steady, very stable. And then all of a sudden we saw a tsunami coming. And the tsunami is called what? It's called renewables, it's called digitalization, EV, AI, you name it. So huge amount of demand around the grid, no? But also a grid that was used to operate in a way that you had large power plant, coal power plant, large nuclear plant that were bringing the power to the consumers in long transmission lines, point to point. Very simple, apparently, no? But now we have questioned this. We are starting putting generation on roofs in small places, in the backyard of my industry or in the ground I have available, so generation becomes distributed. And some of the generation start feeding the grids, or myself as a consumer, I can start also feeding the grid. So we see the power flows become more complex, bidirectional. So this whole power system that was designed and concepted for something has to deliver something different, facing a tsunami of demand. So that's a perfect storm that is around the grid. No? So the question is, what can we do with that? No? What are the way to address those challenges? And for me, I see different things. No? I see the planning piece. So as we are in a world where demand is going to grow, we have long delivery time, long supply chain, and we have permitting challenges, we need to be able to plan for longer term. These days, we plan for 5-10 years, our grids developments. We need to think about planning for 20 years. This is the new horizon we need to do. We need to accelerate this grid deployment. We need to talk about interconnections much stronger. In this world where generation is happening in different places, we talk about intermittent generation. To be able to balance that, the interconnection piece is important. And we need to build flexibility in the system. So all these are the solutions we see coming and that we see needed.
Got it. And I was going to ask whether you think that COPs are really accounting for these practicalities, because you do see just very top line commitments on the energy transition, focus on some of those big generation projects. Or do you think the focus is really there for the practicalities of grid and supply chain, or perhaps not yet?
I really think we need to raise the voice and put grids stronger on the table, on the conversation table. The good thing is that my experience in these years of working in the sector, we face now civil servants who are get much more knowledgeable. So dedication piece, I think we've done. People understand that grids are there, but now we need to get the conversation and become much more concrete, much more specific, with all the measures I've been indicating to you. So for me, that is the important piece. Is that at COP, the conversation and the multilateral conversation. We don't get through the challenge we do have if you don't bring government institutions with grid companies, with the generation companies, with the technology companies. We all need to be around the table and see what is needed in terms of planning. What do I need to plan? How do I need to plan in terms of technologies that need to implement it? How supply chain is evolving, because supply chain face constraints right now, but we're investing. We're investing billions ourselves, $9 billion US, we're investing until 2027. So somehow the industry is reacting, but all together we need to make it happen. So that no part of the supply chain is late or part of this ecosystem is not aligned. So that's what I expect. So with really coming more prominently with a clear agenda. And as I said, we can spell what this agenda is and then engage with all stakeholders around the table, come with agreements, multilateral agreements, come with new business models. I mean, things that are happening in Europe, to mention a concrete example, now around the North Sea, how we bring all those stakeholders, and eventually we can come with a new deal for offshore wind in the North Sea, which brings all those parties I mentioned around the table to sign for volumes and to sign then for affordability and to sign for supply chain and jobs.
So, Alfredo, I was going to ask what you'd like to see coming out of COP, but it does sound like a big part of that is just something more collaborative and more clear that involves more people. But is there anything else that you'd specifically like to see when we come to the end of this, hopefully next weekend?
Look, I think we should keep the fundamentals clear also. In these moments where it seems that everything is questioned or people are uncertain, or we see some countries, regions going backward, I think it's important that we keep the fundamentals of renewables clear. And those fundamentals is around abundances. Renewables are abundant, gigawatts of potential capacity around the world. Renewables help to address energy security, which is the priority these days. Renewables are produced where they are consumed, so they create this sovereignty, energy sovereignty that countries are looking for. Renewables support competitiveness. We are concerned about affordability, but eventually the renewables have proven where they become relevant in the power system, they help to reduce cost of energy. We have plenty of examples of that. And of course, renewables help to create jobs. So we know that. I mean, probably I'm telling things to people already convinced, but these moments of doubts, and that's part of my job every day, is to keep the fundamentals clear, to say, well, we may have 1 or 2 years with lower pace or with some questioning, but the fundamentals remain the same wherever we are.
Got it. I'd say I'm personally quite optimistic here. It's been interesting to see this bit of the agenda that we're on now, so energy and industry, coming literally the 2 days after we've been thinking about jobs, skills and just transition. So it felt like as soon as we started thinking about that, we were already skipping ahead to energy, and now we're coming back. So it seems a bit more linked to me this year. I don't know if you've seen the same.
Sometimes this is what makes me positive, because all the years and all the investments, all the conversation we've had in this ecosystem has brought to the point to be convinced. So no, that we are challenged someplace. Okay, fine. Let's address the challenges. Maybe we need to readjust some of the things we thought. So, and that's fine. Maybe we need to accept that some things will be delayed. Okay, that might be also fine. I think it's important to keep the trajectory, to keep the good things we've already agreed among us, and then keep going eventually.
Got it. Well, Alfredo, we're pretty much out of time, but I'd say it's nice to end on such a positive and people-centric note there. So thank you very much for coming on COP30 Covered, and hope to hear more from yourself and the Hitachi Energy team after the summit as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks once again to Alfredo for his time. And while in that excerpt we chatted mainly about energy systems and grids, Hitachi Energy has also gotten involved with the industry theme of the COP today. It has released a new position paper setting out which heavy industrial activities are practical to electrify at this moment in time and how that could be achieved with the right infrastructure and regulation. So there's your further reading for tonight, unless of course you want to wait up until the small hours for the plenary to finish. That's almost everything for today, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the edie team are taking a much needed rest tomorrow. That's Sunday the 16th. We'll be back firing on all cylinders on Monday, that's the 17th of November, when our theme of the day will be the involvement of small and medium businesses, so SMEs, at COPs. And you might be wondering why? Because when you hear about businesses at COPs, it's usually the lobbying from the biggest polluters that takes the headlines. But last year at the COP in Baku, around 1,000 CEOs were convened and were asked by the organising team to increase their engagement with their SME suppliers. The COP29 team also started to work with the COP30 team to try and upskill and engage thousands more SMEs in between the two events. So we look at why that's so important and the progress made so far. In the meantime, you can check out all of our written COP coverage on edie.net, and this is also where you can access all of this week's podcast episodes. Additionally, on our website, there's information on how you can join our free-to-attend post-COP debrief webinar on November 25th. So we're delighted to be hosting that in partnership with Ecology. So if you've enjoyed this series so far, this is a session in which we'll be unpacking the final agreement and answering your FAQ. I'd love to chat to some of you online then. So as I said, it'd be great to see you registering for that and see you clicking on our content over the weekend. But for now, it's time for me to take a little rest from the COP. So for this episode, it's a goodbye from me, and I'll see you on Monday. Goodbye.